Welcome back to the channel, everyone. In this episode of Building with Ben, I'm going to show you how I installed this metal roof on my 100-year-old farmhouse. Check it out. Thanks. So in typical new construction, you'll be able to install your roof decking as smooth and as level as possible for whatever roofing you're going to attach, whether it's shingles or metal. Well, when you're dealing with a renovation, unless you plan to rip everything off of the roof rafters and resheath it, you're subject to the imperfections of basically the age of the home, the laziness of the workers previously, any number of things. So the easiest option for me was to attach an underlayment over the shingles, then build up the roof from there for my new metal roof. This is a very budget-friendly project. I spent about $5,000 completely re-roofing this 100-year-old farmhouse. As with everything else we do here on the homestead, this is basically an experiment to give me experience. In this case, it's experience with roofing, underlayment, and just dealing with old house renovations in general. So the first part of this video focuses on the roof of our bathroom. Our house is basically constructed of 4 different buildings that were attached together probably decades ago. And this area is the lowest to the ground. It's basically lower than all of the other rooms we have. It's a step down. And it's also basically like a lean-to off of the main living area. And that gives it the lowest roof pitch as well. So I'm able to walk on this and set down a camera tripod. And basically it's the easiest to kind of show on screen because I'm able to get the camera so close to me. You can see here I'm trying to tuck the underlayment under the shingles because I'm not sure how long it's going to be before I can get roofing on this section. Then I'm securing the underlayment down with these orange cap nails. I have a whole bucket of these. I have a ton of them left for future projects. But this is the best way to secure the underlayment without the wind being able to blow it off in the meantime before we can get these wooden furring strips down. At the local home improvement stores, furring strips come in a number of dimensions. They're typically 1x, which means they are less than an inch, typically 3/4 inch thick, and you can get them either 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches wide. These are 1x4s, which means 3/4 inch by 3.5 inch. And I chose this wider dimension because I had never really worked with this method of construction before for roofing. And I wanted to have as most surface as possible to hit with the roofing screw that goes through the sheet metal, so I wouldn't have to re-drill a hole and patch a hole if I missed the wood. So pretty consistently across this whole project, I'm doing a 2-foot by 2-foot grid. That means that these vertical furring strips are about 2 feet on center, and then the horizontal furring strips that go on top of those are about 2 feet on center as well. While you watch the rest of this time lapse, I'll go ahead and tell you about the existing construction of this roof. It's pretty unusual if you're used to conventional framing and roofing, but since this house is so old, it's probably had many iterations of the roof. Basically, there's rough cut 2x4 roof rafters. Those would not meet code today at all, but because it's older growth wood and it's a true 2 inch by 4 inch, it's probably a lot stronger than conventional 2x4s from young pine trees. On top of that, there's horizontal furring strips that are a true 1 inch thick, and they range anywhere from 6 inches wide to 10 inches wide. And I believe those were the original strips used to secure some sort of wood shingle or wood shake roofing. And then sometime after asphalt shingles were invented, they put down maybe a 1/2 inch or a bit thinner form of OSB or plywood decking. That way they could have a consistent surface to nail the shingles to. Over the years, the edges and corners of these sheets of wood have pulled up, and once they start cupping up, they protrude through the asphalt shingles. They pierce them, and then that causes a leak. And it's very difficult to get under and fix that type of mistake. So that's why I'm doing a raised roof, essentially floating above the old roof. And like I said, without peeling off all of the shingles and redoing the entire roof deck, there's not really a way to ensure the integrity of asphalt shingles on this construction. And since I'm doing this project mostly by myself, it would be impossible for me to do that level of demolition while also keeping the house relatively waterproof from the elements. Basically, the point of this project is to continue to keep the house water-free while also building a new roof that'll make it waterproof for the future. So now you can see at this point in the time lapse, I'm working on the west side of the roof. This part of the building is over the kitchen and the living room, and I'm continuing that 2 foot by 2 foot on center grid with the furring strips. You'll notice that I can't complete the furring strip framing in areas where there's a roof penetration, such as a vent fan or a plumbing vent. For the time being, I'm using this underlayment to shed water and keep the water out of any of the holes that I've created with the furring strips. The furring strips basically create a guideline for the water to go down, and hopefully, if the furring strip is screwed down as tight as I think it is, it should keep the water out. But I don't want to pull off the vent fan caps or mess with any of the other roof penetrations until I'm closer to doing the metal roofing, because if I take those off, I'm subject to getting water in the house when it rains. So I don't have a lot of experience with ladders, and I certainly don't own any scaffolding or catwalk or any number of things that professionals would probably use to get this job done quicker and easier. So my method here is to get as high as I can on the ladder, have a safe angle on the ladder so it doesn't tip, and I'm actually able to reach high enough to do 2 rows of horizontal furring strips. This is very important because 2 strips allows me to have one place to sit and one extra backup place for my feet to lock into. And then I don't need the ladder anymore to stand on, and I can just move myself freely across the roof. Angie was doing the wood cutting for me on this slope, and that was very helpful because it meant I didn't have to climb up and down the ladder for every cut. And with this roof slope, I wasn't able to put the saw up here to make cuts on the fly. So this is about the cheapest metal roofing system you can get. These are typically called ag panels, and they do fall under the category of corrugated galvanized aluminum roofing panels. My metal roofing panels are the 5V system. These are basically flat galvanized aluminum panels with some more artistic upside-down V's stamped into it. And these are actually in the same category of roofing as the corrugated wavy roof system that you might see on some barns or shops in your area. And as with any roofing system, it's best practice to try to follow the manufacturer's guidelines. In my case, they don't want the overhang being too long without some method of securing it. I believe they didn't want more than a 2-inch extension past the last screw. So I tried to follow that. I think I did about a 3-inch overhang. And you can see here my last furring strip on the bottom is pretty even with the white fascia trim that wraps around the house. I wanted to overhang that because there's a lot of rotten sections of our fascia, and I wanted to make sure it stayed dry to try to prevent more rot in the house. Similarly with the top, just in case any sort of hurricane or tornado wind was to get under the ridge cap, I need to make sure that the top of each roofing panel is secured as close to the edge as possible. So I have this top horizontal furring strip about even with the top corner, the top peak, I should say, of my roof. I had to do some pretty custom work when it came to the valleys of the house, as well as the chimney and the roof penetrations, such as the vent fan and the plumbing vents. Basically, anywhere that I have to custom cut angles or holes into a roofing panel, I have to have furring strips completely surrounding the perimeter of wherever that penetration is. That gives me somewhere to seal the roof to and clamp it down with these gasket roofing screws. I'll go ahead and show you some close-ups of these custom roofing areas, and I'll try to elaborate a bit on each of them. This is the cap for the range vent fan. Here is the penetration for the chimney. And here is a zoomed out view of what that roof looks like. Here's my custom valley flashing, and here's some special right-angled flashing to keep water off the siding. Once I basically became an expert in installing this type of roofing, the last slope left was the south-facing slope, which actually has a platform underneath. It's the roof of the porch that I could stand on, stack supplies on, and place the tripod on. So this is probably the best view for you to see how I actually install the metal 5V roofing panel. The first panel is always the hardest, and I spend a lot of time sighting it, using string lines, using levels, just trying to figure out how to make sure it's square with the rest of the house, which is basically not square at all. So I'm basically just averaging lines. From that point forward, the rest of the panels are relatively smooth to install. A lot of the experts you would see on YouTube would pre-drill or pre-stamp their panels just so they can know where the screws are going to go, make sure everything's aligned. I can't really do that because this roof is pretty wavy, and I'm afraid I'm going to accidentally stamp a hole in an area where the furring strip is not located. These furring strips are not exactly straight. Some of them crown, some of them are warped and bowed in different directions, and I basically just did the best I could to force them into a straight line. I use a metal awl and a hammer to pierce the metal roof panels everywhere that one of these roofing screws needs to go. And to keep things looking pretty aligned, at least from the ground perspective, is to use this yellow level as a spacer to ensure every hole I stamp is the exact same distance from one of these V-shaped ribs. And since I'm sitting down next to the panel for every screw that I place, I'm able to sight the line up and down to place the screw in the center of the furring strip. There might be a slight variance screw to screw, but you'll never notice it from the ground since all of them are aligned perfectly left to right. You can see that I already have the ridge cap over the metal. That's because I secured it when I was on the other side of the roof installing the metal on that side. Basically, every panel that I slide up on this side goes under the ridge cap, and I stamp a hole with the awl, make the hole a bit bigger with the drill bit, and then secure every other rib to the ridge cap with a rivet. Now this time lapse is really focusing on the easiest part, which is the center panels. But once I get closer and closer to the end, I run out of places to stand because my platform ends. And I run the risk of falling off of the edge of the roof. And since I've already placed the ridge cap on, there's nowhere for me to secure a safety harness. I do have one, but there's really no place to use it on this side. So I don't have it on camera, but I basically had to bring up a lightweight aluminum ladder, build a right-angled jig out of 2x4s to hook it over the ridge cap. That way I could walk up on top of a roof panel, and I could then climb all the way to the ridge cap, and then move my ladder one panel over each time until I was able to finish securing the last few roof panels. So now I'm ending this video with a few selfies of me on the roof. Feel free to pause the video if you want to see the detail in my roof design. Basically, I'm a novice roofer when it comes to metal roofing, and I feel like this turned out pretty well for a 100-year-old house. Please like and subscribe if you haven't, and feel free to comment if you have any questions about what I've done here. I'll see you next time. Thanks.